And welcome back. Once again, my name is Zach. I am joined by the glow plug guru himself, Billy Williams. We are here answering all your tech questions for your diesel, whether they be automotive, agricultural, industrial. So recently, we had a conversation with Jolly. I believe we're pronouncing that name correctly. We do a lot of automotive diesel applications in our troubleshooting. It's nice to get an agricultural one. It's starting to come up. We're getting into March. Yeah,
that's very seasonal, and we do a broad range of industrial and agricultural applications. Mm-hmm. We don't get a lot of calls on them because they're pretty simple,
right?
But this was one, and so we try to help them.
Yeah. So we started off with Jolly. This was a few months back. He had an industrial DB2 on his John Deere tractor, that we had rebuilt, discovered that it had some governor ring failure, which is pretty typical on those pumps. And then he put the pump back on the tractor, but then he called in again, I guess because the pump was not getting primed. So you had a conversation with him. In that conversation, you recommended, based on what he told you, that he examine the starter.
He was not getting the proper cranking RPMs. Standard rule of thumb is 150 RPMs minimum.
Right.
And he was nowhere near that. And so we recommended that he pull the starter and have it tested. Not necessarily replaced, because John Deere starters are not like a 350 Chevrolet that you get for $29.95 at your local AutoZone. These are like $400 starters.
Oh, yeah.
But he did have it tested, and it was bad. So
then he needed to replace it.
Correct.
So he went and found one, replaced it, but still the problem persists. He was not able to get that minimum requirement of 150 RPMs to start the motor.
Correct.
So he still had some issues to work through. Obviously, he was wise enough to give us a call. So let's take a look at the call and see what we could learn from our next conversation with Mr. Jolly.
All right.
Hello, Jolly speaking.
Hey, Jolly, this is Billy Williams with Diesel Care, the tech support.
Right on. You got back quick?
Yeah, my Zoom call apparently got canceled, or I was having internet problems. I'm not sure which. So I wanted to touch base with you. We talked back on the 30th, and I'm just kind of going over the notes here. We built an industrial DB2 off of John Deere for you. And looks like we discussed timing and a few other things. So just following up, you tell me what you're still experiencing or what's going on.
Okay, well, I think I had a slow crank, so I got that corrected for a minute anyway. The starter I pulled out had a nose cone bushing that was totally wiped out. So I went to our local builder, and he stuck a bushing in there for me. And when I reinstalled it, I had a pretty good crank speed. I don't know exactly what it was, but it would drop off fairly quickly. But over a period of time, I went through all four injectors with good crank speed. Well, let me back up. I also did what you suggested. I took the return line off and made sure there was fuel, the return line right at the injector pump, where the little glass ball is, right, above that. Right. Took fitting off, and I had good fuel coming out of there with no air. Liquid, clean, no air fuel at a pretty good rate, it seemed like, when I cranked it. So then I closed that up and went through the bleeding procedure. Again, one injector at a time. The two back ones, towards the driver, got pretty good squirts out of them, but the two front ones, I could never get them to squirt very good. And I got it to hit on, I was trying to, I heard it fire on probably one cylinder at one time.
Okay.
But never got it to start. And now I think I got cranking problems again because I just went up there.
Refresh my memory. I didn't you tell me you had replaced it with a new starter, or did I?
Did. It was a eBay starter, and I think it was bad from the get-go. It was one of those things because when I cranked it for like 15 seconds, because I've been trying to be careful not to crank it too long, it got too hot to the touch. I mean, like sizzling hot.
Right.
And I just didn't get the crank speed out of that starter ever. So I pulled it out. It had a 30-day return, and I'm shipping it back. I'm like, something's wrong with this. It has a test sheet in it that says, but I don't know this. Like I said, I was in the auto repair for 17 years, and I got a lot of bad rebuilt stuff.
Well, that certainly does happen. Again, going back to our previous conversation, it's a minimum of 150 cranking RPMs. The fact that you're getting, because correct me if I'm wrong, were you getting fuel at your injectors before?
I was, but I never got that nice little spray that I'm used to seeing when I'm bleeding out an injector pump when you're ready to cinch the nut back down. I try to just loosen it a little bit so that so that it would show up as a little spray, like a half a turn or something on the nut. So I just don't know. I'm kind of at my wit's end here.
Well, there's two paths to go, or three. Let me kind of give you three options here.
Okay.
The first one is, we can, in order to have the most effective bleeding process, you can do what's called an isolation test. And I think we talked about this before, where you run it out of a separate source of fuel. Now, what that essentially does is that just basically brings the tank closer to the pump, and it allows sometimes that bleeding process, that's about the easiest way to do that. And of course, you have your return disconnected when you're doing that. I can email you the particulars of that.
Okay.
So that won't be a problem, but, that's option one. Now, if you're close to that 150 cranking RPM, sometimes doing it out of an alternate source of fuel will get it over the edge, and it'll fire off. Now, that's only eliminating half the problem. The second option is to get a simple handheld tack and just see what your cranking RPMs are. You have to have a consistent 150. If you're above that, then starter issue is off the table. If you're below that, that's still something that had to be addressed. But excuse me, but the isolation test may get it primed, and then you can kind of move on to another thing.
Right. I think I'm going to have a hard time measuring the RPM because it's got a hydraulic pump on the nose of the motor, and a big, huge counterweight plate, and it's a loader bucket that the bucket's down. So I can't even get to like a manual tack, and I don't have a diesel timing light type thing.
Well, in this instance, you really wouldn't per se need a diesel, what's called a tacking time is what the diesel version is.
Okay.
But honestly, anything that measures RPMs, someone was telling me the other day that there was an app for your phone now that could do that. I don't know about that, but that's well beyond my level of expertise. But
they got apps for everything.
They do. But but somehow measuring those rotations, be it, if you can get to the crank or one of the pulleys, somehow measuring that, if it's in doubt. Generally speaking, if you've been around a piece of equipment for a long time, you can kind of just, by knowledge, know that it's kind of dragging.
Yeah.
Option 3 would, be a little bit more extensive. That would be involving, either, pulling the pump and having us recheck it, which that's never off the table, but I just don't think it's necessary in this case. What I'm deriving from what you're telling me, I know the unit is receiving fuel. It's getting it out to the injectors. It sounds to me, and I hate to sound like a broken record, but it just sounds like you don't have enough RPMs to push it over the edge. Now, running it out of that alternate source of fuel, and again, it has to be good, clean fuel because it's unfiltered. It's going to go straight to the injection system. So, that's a critical point. That may, it's going to eliminate some of those draws off the fuel system. So you're that's the best possible chance of getting it primed.
Okay.
I don't recommend using any type of, starter fluids or those type things.
Yeah, I tried it a couple of times. It's always scary because it knocks, and it fired per sec, but I don't want to bit the rod on it.
Yeah, I shy away from that because there's just too much that can go wrong. Now, full disclosure, I have done it before, so don't, I'm not going to sit here like a Puritan and say I've never done it, but it's usually in an instance where I know I'm going to be responsible for whatever happens anyway. So in this instance, I would say if I were working on your tractor, I would try to prime it out of an alternate source of fuel. I would also try to develop some way to where I know where my crank and RPMs are, because you're just going to have to know that. And
right. I think I like I said, I get good cranking RPMs for about 5 seconds, and then it starts to drop off. So I don't know. And then there was one point where I kind of felt like the cylinders had gone dry and was creating drag or something, because once it started firing, it started cranking pretty good. So and it's pumping out. By the way, it's pumping out smoke out of the stack.
Okay, and that's another thing that for me as your rebuilder, I find comforting, because I know fuel's getting to the cylinders. We just got to get enough of it to the cylinders to fire it off.
What about the injectors themselves?
Well, what was the original problem? Forgive me, my notes have went blank on my computer screen here.
Yeah. No worries. I'm sure you've talked a lot about different diesel vehicles since I last talked to you. It's let's see, the governor ring failure on it. It was a governor ring failure is what you guys found out.
Right. And I do remember that. Were you having any smoking issues before, like it white smoke when you started, or black smoke?
No, although I think it probably was smoking, and I just sort of wrote it off as to an old tractor because the thing is so old that, and a lot of those old, when they were new, they smoked, but when that happens over time, you don't really notice it, but it was pretty smoky.
Well, let me say this. The injectors, as they wear, a lot of times, not always, a lot of times the popping pressure will slowly decline. And when a popping pressure declines, it alters the timing of the engine. Because if you had an injector, let's say that was popping at 2,000 PSI, and now it pops at 18, it's firing 10% sooner than the engine is anticipating. And that alters the timing, not by the direct 10%. There's way more math involved in that than I can get into or probably even explain. But
Right.
but it does alter the timing. And so it ends up firing sooner than it should. Now, typically that doesn't matter from a bleeding process. If you were getting fuel out all 4 injectors, as you're bleeding it, then I would say, and you were still having some issues, then, I would certainly explore the injectors a little bit. How many hours is on the engine?
The hour meter quit working. It's a tach hour meter combination, and it doesn't work. So,
okay.
But it is. I think it's a John Deere 310C, and it's a 90, like 5 or between 5 and 7. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Have you ever had the injectors out? Had them pop tested or serviced? Or
I don't think so. It was this machine. My brother bought it new for a construction company, and then I inherited it as they retired it about 6 years ago. And then when, in my care, it doesn't get used very much here on the property.
Okay.
But she's well used.
Yeah. Well, I will confess, if the injectors have not been out, I don't think this is a direct correlation, but weak injectors make your priming job that much harder.
Okay.
And a standard life of an injector, and I hesitate to say it in those terms because a lot of it depends on how the unit's treated and serviced and such. But anytime you get into the 3, 4, 5,000 hour range, it's probably a time to have the injectors, pop tested. Now those, I believe, are going to be the pencil style injectors. They are not rebuildable per se. They can be popped and sometimes the pressures can be reset on them, but if they have to be rebuilt, that's considered a throwaway injector.
Okay, is that possibly why the front 2 aren't squirting and the back 2 are?
Well, when you say squirting, you're talking about where the line connects to the injector, correct?
Well, usually in my experience, it comes out of the top of the nut, a little spray when you got a good, when you're ready to start it and you're ready to tighten it down.
Well, if you have the injectors that I'm thinking about, they call them pencil style because they're about the size of a pencil, and then they've got a little inlet that comes off, and that's your fuel line connects to that, and then they have a return that comes out the top.
Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah.
Okay. So when you're bleeding it, you would crack that where the line connects to the injector, and that's where I'm talking about getting that white frothy kind of fuel air mixture.
Yeah, I don't get that. I get a little on the front 2. I get a little like pulse of a puddle, and on the back 2, I got a little spray.
Okay. Again, I hate to sound like a broken record. I do think that it's an RPM issue.
Okay.
I'll tell you this. Let me offer a couple things. One, we obviously did your pump. I always, when I talk to customers, I always recommend sending injectors in. If you'll pay to ship me the injectors, I'll be more than happy to pop test them and reset them, no charge, and send it back to you. That's won't take me, but if I receive them on a Tuesday, I'll ship them out to you on a Wednesday. I mean, it's a simple process to check.
Okay, it's going to involve. I have to take the whole. It's a bolt down hood over the whole top of the engine. I'm going to, and it's heavy, and I have to slide it up over the exhaust stack.
Yeah.
So that I can get good access to them to to take all those lines off. So
it sounds like it'd be a real pain.
yeah,
I would. I tell you, if you will, you have my cell number here. If you will text me an email address, I will email you the information on an isolation test. It's pretty simple, but but I'll send you that information. And
okay, I've done it before. I actually made a little tank out of a 4-inch PVC with a couple of caps that I could pressurize to 8 pounds, and then I've put it vertical so it's all fuel at the outlet end and with a filter on it. But
it doesn't really need to be pressurized. Honestly, it works better, in my opinion, if you just let the transfer pump inside the injection pump do its job.
Gravity.
Just let it pull that fuel, and that way it duplicates exactly what we do on our test equipment.
But go ahead and email me. I'm curious as to how you guys do it, so I will text that to you.
Yeah,
and
text it to me, and I will send you. I'll email that as soon as my internet comes back up. I will send you an email, and then I will. I'll put you on the calendar to call back on Wednesday just to check in with you, and we'll see.
I'll probably. I'm out here. I'm an hour from town, but I think next time I go in, I'll just bring the starter into that rebuilder and have them check it out better and make sure it's. What concerns me is something else is causing a drag on the motor. Although there was a point where I got it to crank like at normal speed, like a good spin over, but it like I said, it dropped off after about 5 seconds.
Yeah, I admittingly, it's a little bit troubling, this drag situation. I mean, I hope we're not talking about something more.
Me too.
Best case scenario is we're talking about a starter issue and you've just had a run of bad luck. But I will just text me your email address to this phone number, and I will get that information out to you, and then I will schedule a follow-up, and I'll touch base with you, and we'll go a little further.
All right. Thanks, Billy. I appreciate your time.
All right. Take care, sir.
All right. Have a great day.
Bye.
So sometimes troubleshooting can be more art than science. You got to meet people where they're at and come up with solutions based on what they need their vehicle to do. In this instance, Jolly was dealing with, not able to get those minimum RPMs. And because of that, the pump was not able to get primed and the engine wasn't starting. And if I remember in the call correctly, he had to get somewhere where he could actually get some work done on the John Deere tractor.
Yeah, I think this was a situation where he needed to get it moved and he needed to get it primed in order to get it moved. Obviously, a starter, once it starts, you can drive from here to Montana.
Right.
But you've got to get it started, and wherever you turn the key off, that's going to stay till you correct that problem. So this is not the order in which we would have done it in a typical service operation, but because of the circumstances, we recommended him do a isolation purge of the system, and that's basically where you're bringing the tank closer to the injection pump.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't require as many cranking RPMs to prime it, and we purge that air out. It may or may not work. He does not have a working tack on this unit, so we really don't know what the RPMs are. I did recommend to him to look into some method of getting that RPM verified. I suspect that he's probably below the minimum still, but bringing the tank closer might be just enough to get this unit started.
Yeah, ultimately, and get it started so that he can get it somewhere where the real work that needs to be done can be done.
Exactly, and that's where we left it. We will probably have another conversation with him.
Sure.
And one thing that I would say to the folks out there that we interact with and our customers and just people that call in, We do try to follow up. We do try to.
Of course.
We will leave someone on a calendar for days, sometimes weeks, until they can get around to servicing it. And before we complete it in our system, we generally will know that corrected the problem, because it helps us and it helps them.
Yeah, absolutely. We got to follow up and make sure we solve their problems. So if you have problems out there with your diesel, whether it be a John Deere tractor or Ford F-150, give us a call, 1-800-961.
Ford F-150 didn't have a diesel, so it's a Ford F-250.
See, there you go. I'm not a diesel expert. I'm just here setting up the cameras. But I do know our phone number. It's 1-800-961-9290. If you'd like to learn more about diesel care and performance, you can visit us at www.dieselcare.store and reach out to us with any questions you may have. We would love to read them and answer all your diesel questions. Until then, we'll see you next time.
Yes, I'm built out and bound to go. I'm gonna leave here running, because walking is most too slow.
All right, back to one.